Well, good morning, everybody. Wherever that video is from, I want to go there. Is anybody with me? That looked pretty good. But I'm glad you're not there. I'm glad you're here. And for our guests in the room, I want to say welcome. My name is David Tillman. I'm one of the pastors here at River City, and so excited. You've picked a great week to join with us this week as we begin this new series, A Walk Through Philippians. And the theme of this letter to the Philippians is this. See if this is something that anybody in the room besides me needs. It is how to have joy even when things go wrong. And I love this message today because I need this so bad. And as I thought this week, I thought back about times in my life when things have gone wrong. There's only really been a few times in my life when I thought I was legitimately going to die. But every single one of those times has been on an airplane. So let me tell you about one of those times. Maybe don't book a flight with me. But this is what happened somewhere between Memphis and Atlanta one time. Now, a friend of mine, he and I won a trip through our work to go to Atlanta, so we were going for the weekend. We were super excited, and just like everybody on the plane, we're really pumped, and we're talking about everything that we're going to do once we get there. Everybody's excited. They're drinking their drinks. They're eating their pretzels and watching their movies, and everything is fine. And then the pilot comes on, and like most of the time when the pilot comes on, I understood like every third word that he said, but I did hear in there something about initial descent and Atlanta. And so everybody's pumped. We're starting to descend, coming into Atlanta. But as soon as we did, the plane started to shake. Not a huge fan of that. It doesn't bother me as much now as it used to, but the plane started to shake. In the beginning, it was just a little bit of a shake. And it's like, okay, that's uncomfortable. Let's go back to watching the movie. But as we continued to descend, it got worse and worse and worse. It got so bad that things were violently shaking, like you had to hold your drink or it was going to fall over, and people are starting to pull out those sick bags, like sorting through the bag you never want to see come out. The guy next to you is pulling it out, just ready to let it fly, and you're like, Lord, please no, not next to me on the plane. And it's just worse and worse, and the turbulence got really bad, but then we had these moments of just absolute free fall. You guys ever experienced this? Where, like, the plane is flying along, and I don't understand the science of this, but I know how it feels when you're on the plane, is that the thing just falls and then hits something, and it stops, and then it happens again. And at the bottom of one of those free falls, the guy in front of me, he grips the seat in front of him and starts making the sign of the cross. I'm like, great, this guy is preparing to meet Jesus right now in front of me. He knows something that I don't know. This is over. And so everybody's just wigging out. I remember, so as excited as everybody was before, just a few minutes later, you can't hear anything except the engines on the outside of the plane. It is just complete quiet. You look at people's face, and they are just in breathless fear. So contrast that when the death trap actually is on the ground, we land and the roar goes up and people start clapping. It's been a rough flight when that happens. And everybody's high-fiving each other like, we made it, we're in Atlanta, we didn't die, and everybody is super pumped. And the whole reason I tell you that story is this. As I thought back about that this week, what I realized is that life really is like a rough flight sometimes, isn't it? We're really happy because we've kind of got things sorted how we want them. Everything's going well. We're cruising along in life. And then turbulence hits. Something happens that we don't want to happen, that we can't control, and it shakes up every single thing in our life. And to make it worse, sometimes those things come in bunches. Sometimes the thing is really bad, and we just go into absolute free fall. And we don't know when we're actually going to stop. And we hope it's not the ground that stops us. It's like we're at mercy sometimes, it feels like, of our circumstances, and it seems like our circumstances have the ability to just steal all of the joy out of our life. And one thing I know about all of us in the room, or at least I think I know this about everybody that's in the room, to some level or another, we've all experienced some kind of turbulence in our lives. Something's come along when we didn't really want it to, or we didn't expect it to, that's shaken up our life. It might be something that you're going through right now. You may have experienced the death of a friend, or maybe of a loved one, or maybe of a relationship. Maybe you've gotten a bad report from a doctor, or from a financial advisor, or maybe from a teacher. You went in and you found out that the exam didn't go like you wanted it to go, really didn't go like you expected, and it's over. To make it worse, though, sometimes the things that are going on in our personal life combined with the things that are going on in our world, maybe something like this, maybe something like COVID, maybe something like inflation, maybe the trauma of actually going to the gas station and filling up your car with gas in 2022. That hurts my feelings. And so all of those things combined can leave us feeling sometimes in this place where we're just overwhelmed, just completely overwhelmed. And I don't know about you, but whenever I face these circumstances, whenever I face problems that I don't want to face that are out there in culture, the knee-jerk reaction a lot of times in my brain is this: I cannot wait until this chaos that I'm experiencing right now is over so that I can be happy again. Has anybody ever felt that way? I just want to be happy again, and I think maybe if this is over. Well, if that's you, I've got really good news, because the message of this letter of Philippians is one that comes right into our chaotic lives. And this is the message of this entire book, that there is a deep joy that is available for those that are loved by God and love God. And it's not based on circumstances at all. And here's the interesting thing that we're going to see over the next few weeks is not only is it not based on circumstances, but also in the midst of some of the worst circumstances that you can imagine, our joy in God seems to have the ability and the propensity to deepen during those times. It's an incredible thing that we're going to see. And I think a timely thing, I know for me. And this is not just available for missionaries or humanitarians or whoever you think of as a super Christian, but Paul's going to say that, no, this is for the normal life of the average Christian, that we can experience this joy that comes out of our life no matter what we are facing in life. I've entitled this message, Joy in Chaos. And if there was ever anybody that was qualified to tell us how we can have joy in chaos, it was the Apostle Paul. So I want to tell you, just as we come to this letter of Philippians, what his circumstances were at the moment when he writes this letter with this theme of deep, abiding joy. He's in a dungeon. He's in prison. He's most likely on death row, chained to a couple of soldiers on each arm. Put into prison because of his preaching of the gospel, he is about to be on trial in front of Caesar to see whether he lives or if he dies. And in this moment, and as we come to this book, what we see is that Paul is completely overwhelmed. But not overwhelmed like we talked about just a minute ago. I mean, you and I would be overwhelmed, I would be overwhelmed, but the thing that's incredible as you read through this letter is that what Paul is overwhelmed with is joy. What's flowing out of his life from the dungeon, chained to the guards, is joy. One of the things he's excited about is that he has these two guys on either side that he can tell about the love and the grace of Jesus, and they can't get away from him. He's chained to these guys. And then as he thinks back, he starts to write letters because he remembers all of these churches that God used him to plant throughout Europe, throughout Asia, throughout the known world, and he just remembers all of the amazing things that God has done. And so as he does that, he starts to fire off letters to these people. He's got time, and so he's writing these letters because he wants not something from them. He wants to encourage them and remind them of how good God is, no matter what it is that they're facing. And so over the next 4 weeks, we want to encourage you to read this letter with us, to just really let this sink down into your life. Guys, we can do this. Chapter 1 is 30 verses. So you can read that super fast. If you go crazy this afternoon, you could read the whole letter, and it would take you maybe 15 minutes, maybe. But today what we're going to look at is this opening chapter where Paul opens this letter to the Philippians, and what he's going to tell them is what the foundation for his joy. Here's why he has joy in the circumstances that he's in these terrible situation that he's in, and how they can have it too. And then by extension, that's going to apply to every single one of us in this room, how we can be filled with that same joy. So starting in verse 3, I want to read to you how Paul opens this letter to these people in Philippians, and this is what he says. I give thanks to my God for every remembrance of you, always praying with joy for all of you in my every prayer, because of your partnership in the gospel from the first day until now. I'm sure of this, that he who started a good work in you will carry it on to completion until the day of Christ Jesus. So he says to them, guys, I want you to remember, and the reason I have so much joy as I write to you is that what happened in your midst when this church started was a miracle. He wants them to understand this doesn't just happen. This is an incredible thing that God's done. He says, remember that the same God that started this work in you, he's with you, and he's not going to abandon you. He's going to carry this all the way through to completion. And this is what he's remembering. If you go to Acts 16 and read, we have the story of the starting of this church in Philippi. And this is why he's saying it's such a miracle. Paul had decided on his journey that he was going to leave and he was going to take the gospel to Asia. This is what he felt like God was leading him to do. So right before he's about to leave, he goes to sleep and he has a dream. And in his dream, a man from Macedonia, the province of Macedonia in Europe, says, come over here and help us. So he wakes up and he just knows, okay, this is God speaking to me that I'm not supposed to go where I was going to go, but I'm supposed to go to Europe instead. So he goes to Europe, to this province of Macedonia. First place he comes to in Macedonia is Philippi. First place he comes to as he walks into Philippi, out by a river on the outskirts of town, is a little prayer meeting that's happening out there on the outskirts of town. He walks up to these people and he says, hey, have you ever heard about Jesus? That's kind of what I'm here to tell people about. He preaches the gospel to them, and these people get saved. One of them is a lady named Lydia who kind of becomes the primary benefactor for the church. She's a successful businesswoman. And so Paul goes around and he starts to preach in Philippi. And as he does, I mean, this has happened to all of us, of course. A demon-possessed woman starts following around and yelling at him and saying, Paul, servant of the Most High God. It annoys him so bad that he turns and he casts the demon out of this lady, which is pretty crazy miracle. But what happened was when he cast the demon out of her, her boss, who used to use her to tell people's fortunes, he's so frustrated that he's taken away this form of revenue from him. He's an important man. He has Paul thrown in jail. So Paul and his friend Silas are thrown in jail. You probably have heard this story before. They decide, well, we're here in jail. Might as well just pray, and then we'll start singing some songs. So when they're having their worship service in there, God sends an earthquake and rattles the whole place so bad that all the doors swing open. The jailer is standing there knowing that, okay, I'm going to die because all the people are going to escape. Paul goes up and he says, no, everybody's still here. The guy's so impressed with Paul's integrity, he says, hey, well, come up to my house. I want to feed you dinner. When he does, Paul preaches to them. All of his family is saved and baptized and become members of the church. This is how the church at Philippi started. So drawing on that shared history, this is what Paul's saying. Guys, what happened in your midst is a miracle. This was God's idea. He sent the dream. He sent me to you. He saved you guys. He brought you together. He's got huge plans from you, and he's never going to abandon you. Stay with it, guys. And because he's so excited for them and he loves them so much, he just breaks out in prayer. He says, this is what I'm praying for you guys. In verse 9, this is what he says. And I pray this, that your love will keep on growing in knowledge and every kind of discernment, so that you may approve the things that are superior and may be pure and blameless in the day of Christ, filled with the fruit of righteousness that comes through Jesus Christ to the glory and praise of God. So Paul says, what I'm praying for you guys is this, that your love would just continue to grow and grow and grow. And the way that he describes love, I think, is pretty interesting because he says, I want your love to grow, what did he say here? In wisdom, in knowledge, and then in every kind of discernment, so that you may approve the things that are superior to the end that you would be pure and blameless. And what's interesting about that is that's a totally different definition of love than we have in our culture, isn't it? He's saying, no, that the way that you'll know that you're beginning to love like Jesus is that you'll love what he loves, and then you'll stand against the things that he stands against. It's a love that's filled with knowledge that is discerning. And I want you to grow up into that love. And then he sums it up for them and says, so that you will be filled with fruit, filled with the fruit of righteousness that comes from Christ and then gives glory to God. And I love that because what he's saying to them is that the foundation of your joy, the foundation of his joy as he writes to them, is this relationship with God. That it's not based on anything. It's not something that we can produce in our lives, but it's something that's given to us. It's a gift that's given to us by God. The result of spending time with God. And when we spend time with him, we become like him. That's such an incredible insight, isn't it? And the reason that's so cool is because this is kind of the basis of the difference between legalistic religion and relationship, true relationship with Jesus. And this is what it looks like. So religion says this. Religion says you need to do more and you need to try harder, because that's the way to produce love or to produce joy in your life. That if you want more joy in your life, you just try really hard. Like, today I'm going to crush it. I'm going to be super joyful. I'm going to be super loving. I'm going to, all of it, the entire focus is on the outside. It's from the outside, and then it's going to go to the inside. That's what they tell you. But the problem is that doesn't work. And if you've ever tried it, or maybe you're trying it now, you know it doesn't work. And what people say to you is what you need to do is just fake it until you make it. You need to just pretend out here, and then eventually it's going to be real on the inside. That's what legalistic religion says. But the problem is you will always be doing that, and it's never going to work. People on the outside, though, they may see it and go, man, she is the most joyous person ever. But you're knowing, no, I'm actually not. It's all a game. I'm pretending to be joyful. I'm super angry right now. But you don't know it because I'm so great at faking it. And that's what legalistic religion does. Nobody wants that. We don't want that. But you contrast that on the other side with how we were designed. We were designed to be in relationship with God, actual relationship where he speaks to us and we know him and he knows us. We are loved and we love God in an actual relationship and know him like we can know anybody else. Now, in so doing that, then he wants to change us from the inside, change our hearts, so that what comes out of our lives is the fruit of that relationship with him. What comes out of us is what naturally comes out of anything that is alive. It produces something. That's what we're designed to do. We were never designed to fake it, but he wants to love us into a different identity, to make us more like him. Now, the best and one of the clearest teachings I know of how we can understand how this works is the teaching of the most joy-filled person that ever walked the planet, and that's Jesus. Now, Jesus one day is walking along with his disciples. And as he's walking along with his disciples, I just picture them coming to a vineyard because he's an amazing teacher. As you walk through the Gospels, you'll see that he used everything around him as a way to teach some other reality. He created it all, so he's had some time to work on all of these analogies. So they're walking through the vineyard. And as they walk through the vineyard, he teaches them this lesson that I'm sure none of them have ever forgotten, and I'm sure many of you have heard before. John chapter 15, verse 4 and 5. This is how he's teaching them. He says this, "Remain in me, and I in you. Just as a branch is unable to produce fruit by itself, unless it remains on the vine, neither can you unless you remain in me. I am the vine, and you are the branches. The one who remains in me and I in him produces much fruit, because you can do nothing without me." Now, one thing that I learned this morning is that if you want to have a really great prop and you want to use it, don't leave it in the green room where the band goes, because this would have been way more impressive before they literally ate half of it. Just picture this being huge. I was at Kroger for a long time going, I got to find the biggest thing. It didn't matter. I could have bought one that looked like this, and they just ate it all. But imagine this is huge. And imagine that Jesus grabbed it and he did something like this. And he said, this is the thing, guys. I'm the vine. You guys, you're the branches. Got it? Okay, so the way that this thing works is that all of the nourishment comes down the vine. You're the branch. You're just connected to the vine. Got it? Okay, so what happens is when you're connected into the vine, all this nourishment comes in. And what do the branches do? Does a branch sit there and go, dude, I'm going to crush grapes today. I'm going to produce the greatest grapes that have ever been produced, and just like, oh man, here it goes. I'm going to fake it till I make it. No, you can't. Like, that's not how it works. Because what happens is, well, this thing isn't going to produce any grapes, is it? Because it's disconnected from the vine. There's no life in it, so there's nothing there. But if we're connected, just pretend this was connected and remember that it was bigger, that what happens when something is alive, that when it's nourished, is that fruit naturally comes from it. If it's a grapevine, it produces grapes if it's healthy. And so what Jesus is saying to them is, guys, this is how this works. Don't ever think that you can do something on the outside that's going to move to the inside. No, you need to be nourished and supplied by me, and I'll take care of everything else. That's what's great. You can rest because fruit is going to be produced if you remain in me. It's absolutely going to happen because that's the way that I've designed it. And then in verse 9 and 10, this is what he says. He says, as the Father has loved me, I've also loved you. Remain in my love. If you keep my commands, you will remain in my love, just as I've kept my Father's commands and remain in his love. And I love the way that Eugene Peterson says this in his paraphrase. Let's take a look at that. He says, I've loved you the way my Father has loved me. Make yourselves at home in my love. If you keep my commands, you'll remain intimately at home in my love. That's what I've done, kept my Father's commands and made myself at home in his love. So Jesus is saying that the real indicator, if you're really allowing me to love you and you're remaining in my love, is that you trust me. Because what he's saying is that my commands are not to take something away from you, but I want you to flourish. I've set up this whole thing, and I know how it works. So if you'll just let me nourish you, if you'll let me supply you, then I'm going to do things in and through your life that you never would have imagined could happen. It will blow your mind, but you have to trust me. You have to remain in my love. If you want to experience my love full force, then you have to give yourself to me full force. And then he sums it up. I think this is incredible. Verse 11, this is just an amazing statement. So Jesus says, I have told you these things so that, it's the whole reason, so that my joy would be in you and that your joy would be complete. He said, I want the same joy that's in me to be overflowing in you. That's the key. You abide in me, you're going to produce joy in your life. So my best crack at a definition of joy this morning is this, is that joy is the deep settled confidence that you are fully loved, God is with you, and you will never be forgotten. And the only way that we'll ever actually experience this, the only way that you'll really, really know deep inside of you this is true and experience God working in you in this way is if you spend time with him and see for yourself that it's true. You can't outsource this. You can't listen to a message and then just have this be true in your life. You have to go and experience him on your own. You have to come to him. You have to full force remain in his love. So how do we get there? Because I thought about that this week and what this looks like in our life. I remembered when I was I know this is going to be such a weird, you're going to be like, where's he going with this? But I remember when I was a lifeguard at Adventure River. Trust me, this is going somewhere. If you're not from Memphis, what Adventure River was a water park. And it was awesome from 1985 to like 1995. And it was right down the street, like maybe 5 minutes. And it was cool. And I went there. My parents just dropped me off like a babysitter just every single day. And then eventually, when I got old enough, I thought, I'm going to work at this place because this is going to be an amazing job. And it was an amazing job. So I'm just out there, just twirling the whistle every single day. And it's great. But it was a serious job, too, because every once in a while, and this is a crazy thing, people that can't swim also think it's super cool to go to water parks and just spend the entire day there. I don't know why it's true, but it's actually true. Like, I can't swim, so maybe for recreation today, I'll go a place that's completely based on me being able to swim, and that's what they do. So that's why we were there. And I was working at the lazy river this day, and you guys know what that is. The thing just like it goes around, and it's pretty calm, but then every once in a while there's these jets that push the current and move you along. And you can be in a raft, or you could just be walking around. Well, this day, there was a guy that was walking around. And I was on the other side of the place, but I could see him, and like, when you're a lifeguard, you know, like, I better keep my eye on that guy. So I start kind of walking towards him, and as I do, he's coming up towards the jets. I'm like, oh man, let's see what happens here. And he just looks unsteady, you know, he's having a great time, but he hits the jets, whoosh, feet come out from under him. And he's under the water, and I can see him. I start walking a little bit quicker at this point because he's under the water, and I'm like, okay, come on, come up. He's not coming up. I can see him under the water. He's kind of flailing. When I'm starting to get a little bit closer to him, his head comes out of the water. Takes a huge breath, and he's flailing like this, right? And he just goes back under. So at this point, I'm running. I'm like, this is bad. And then as I'm running towards him, it keeps happening. He comes up, huge breath, flailing, goes back down. And this happens for a while. I run, and of course, I jump in. Last thing I want to do is get wet. And I jump in, and I grab the guy. Because when his head would come up, as I'm running to him, I'm screaming to him as I'm running, stand up. Stand up. But he can't hear me. He can't hear me because breathing is loud and flailing is loud, and I'm like, stand up. And so I jump in and I grab him and I say, stand up. And when I do, he's fully like 2 feet taller than I am. Maybe not. Like he was like 6'5"-ish. And some of you doubt that because like when you're short, you have a tough time. Like I just say, I'll say to somebody sometimes like, man, that guy was, you know, you remember him? He was pretty tall. They're like, dude, he was 5'10". I'm like, exactly. Yeah, he was super tall. But this guy stands up, and so the reason that I knew that I could go grab him and stand him up because I knew the guy was 6'5", and I knew that the water was 3 feet tall. But he was actually drowning. And if I hadn't jumped in and saved him, I don't know, would he have ever stood up? I don't really know the answer to that. And it would be super easy for me to stand here, that's kind of what I've done actually, and make fun of the guy for almost hope he's not here. But it would be easy to make fun of the guy. But the reality is we've all had our legs swept out from under us in life, haven't we? We've all just been kind of walking along, kind of enjoying it. Water feels pretty good. And then we hit the jets. If we'd have known that they were coming, they may have still knocked us off our feet, but like we would have been ready, but that's not the way life works. The way life works is that we're walking along and then whoosh, there they go. And then we're underneath the water and we're drowning. But I think what God would want to say to us today, and the whole reason I told you this story is because I think what he would say to us is that you may feel like you're drowning, but you don't have to. You don't have to. You can stand up. And when you do, what you're going to see is that you're going to see that there's something solid under your feet. You're going to see that there's something that you can stand on that will support you. And what I've learned from going around a whole lot of lazy rivers at that time and then since then is that even if you get swept off your feet, you can remember and you can know in your head, like, the water's 3 feet tall. And I'm not 6'5", but I'm not 3 feet tall, so I'm not going to drown in this water. I'm going to put my feet back down and I'm going to stand on something that's firm and I'm going to start walking again. And I think that's what God would want to say to us today, that you can start walking again. Even if today you feel like, you know what, I feel like I'm drowning today, that we can put our feet down on something that's firm. And just maybe as a way to help us remember it, I thought of 3 P's, because if they all start with the same letter, maybe you'll remember that this is how we stand. But when we stand, I think God would say this to us. The first thing that we stand on is we can stand on his promises. That we can stand on his word. He's literally given us his word. He's made himself small enough to where we can hear him. And he's spoken to us and said, hey, this is my whole story of what I've been trying to do throughout history. I'm trying to build a kingdom of people that realize that I'm for them and I love them. And I want them to come to me, and I want them to be nourished and supplied by me. That's the whole reason. And in Psalm 40, for instance, is if you were to go and you were to say, I need a promise to stand on today. In Psalm 40, he says that I called out to God when I was in distress. And he pulled me up out of the clay, out of the miry clay, and he set my feet on a rock, and he gave me a place to stand. Many people will see it, and they will be amazed at what God's done. And that's what Paul's saying to the Philippians. Remember, stand on these promises. And when we do, I think the other thing that we'll see is that we can also stand in his presence, second P. So we see his promises, and his promises say, I'm inviting you into my presence. Because he really does want to spend time with you. He really does want to meet your every need. His half-brother James said in one of the letters that he wrote in the New Testament, that if you draw near to God, that he will draw near to you. And the last thing, that we can also stand on his provisions for our every single need. Paul's going to say later in chapter 4 of Philippians, we're going to look at it in a few weeks, he's going to tell them that my God will supply all of your needs according to his riches and glory in Christ Jesus. That is what is available for you. It can never be exhausted. In fact, he gave you needs so that you would realize, I have needs. I need to go somewhere, and the place that you can go is God, and you will never exhaust his supply. But you'll never know that until you go to him. He's saying, come to me. What do you need? I'm not overwhelmed. You may be overwhelmed, but I'll never be overwhelmed. I want to overwhelm you with how good I am. And I want joy, and I want love, and I want peace to flow out of your life. And it's available because I'm here. If you just come to me. Let's pray together. God, as we start this series, we're so grateful for this promise that no matter what it is that we need, no matter what we're facing, that you're inviting us into your presence, reminding us that there is something firm today that we can put our feet on. That the God that began a good work in us is going to complete that work. And many people are going to look at it and say, wow, look at what God's done. And for somebody in the room today, today may be the day when you begin to stand. You may say, I don't know. I know what my life looks like, and it looks like that withered vine. There's no life in it, and I know there's no life in it. What I think God would say to you is maybe the same thing Paul said to that group of people. He came and said, hey, there's some bad news, and it's that all of you have rebelled against God. I have too. All of us have sinned, and we've come short of God's glory. What that means is that not that we've done the worst thing or that we've done all the bad things, but that we did our own thing. And he's saying, yeah, you rebelled and you did your own thing, but here's the great news that I have to tell you guys this morning is that there is God himself that stepped down out of history, and he went to the cross, despising the shame. For the joy that was before him, he endured the cross so that you could have a relationship with him, and he wants you to come to him. He'll forgive you. He'll lift you up out of the miry clay. He'll put your feet on a rock. And you'll be amazed at what he can produce through your life. Will you come to him today? And this is the way that looks. I remember when I was 11 at a camp, and I realized for the first time that, God, I'm running the opposite direction of you. And you are perfect, and you're holy, and I'm not, and that's a problem. Will you forgive me? I need you. And I'll never forget how my life changed that day. I knew that there was nothing between me and God anymore, that we were in relationship. My sin was not an issue. It had been taken care of. And if that's you today, I invite you to come to him. And we're going to sing, we're going to respond, and I love this song that we're going to sing because it talks about that our testimony is that those of us that know God and have walked with God is that rains came into our life, winds blew our life, but because of the firm foundation that we're standing on, that we have been sustained by Jesus and have joy in him in the midst of it. Stand with us and let's sing together.